Now, while Harris has managed to narrow some of the former president's sizable leads in battleground states, former President Trump still leading in 5 out of 6 of those same states. So was the so-called Kamala bump that Democratic pollsters were hoping to see just wishful thinking?
Well, I think he had a lot of donors who said, get rid of Joe, we'll give more money. And those donors are now, they've given the money, and now, they're going to be scraping for additional dollars. But you've got a lot of people out there, you've got a lot of hardcore progressives who are anybody but Trumpers. And they will, have already said that they would vote for Biden, even if he was in a coma, they would vote for this man. And you've got the same media that are now recreating Kamala that told us that Biden was as sharp as ever. These people continue to lie. And when you start looking at their policies, and this is what really Americans need to look at, regardless of who is at the top of the ticket of the Democrat Party, you're going to have the same policies. You look at Kamala and you look at her as border czar and what a disaster she was for this country. The fact that 10 to 14 million people have been allowed entry into our country. Million. I mean, we're talking millions of people, more than the populations of a number of states that have been allowed into this country merely because they want to increase the numbers in their congressional districts to maintain power. The fact that you've had over 110,000 people who've died as a result of fentanyl illegally entering your country. The women, the children who have been murdered and raped as a result of people who should never be here. Those things, the increase in crime, the gang cartels, the drug cartel activities that are happening in our communities, the Democrats and Harris are ignoring, because the only thing that they, at the end of the day, are ultimately focused on is maintaining control and power. And then you start looking at their financial schemes and their attacks on American energy, their attacks on American business. And I'll tell you, I represent the great state, North Texas, but the great state of Texas, where we love our oil and gas jobs. And straight from her mouth, she has already promised that she's going to get rid of the oil and gas industry. You think about how much that is going to increase our inflation, our energy costs, our electricity costs, to those people who can barely afford right now to even eat. This is under, Kamala's America.
Yeah, certainly nobody in my former home state of Texas happy about that. President Trump, in typical fashion, wasting no time calling out his newly minted opponent on the campaign trail this week. Let's take a look.
Kamala Harris gets in, she would be the most radical far-left extremist ever to occupy the White House times 10. There's never been a lunatic like this in the White House, and we've had some bad ones. But the worst one is Joe, actually. As a senator, Harris was ranked the #1 most left-wing Democrat in the Senate. Think of that. She's ranked the #1, and that's not what this country wants. She makes Bernie look like a moderate. He looks like Bernie Sanders. He's actually quite moderate by comparison.
And the race in many ways will come down to messaging. Hard to believe Bernie Sanders being called moderate by the former president. Do you believe Trump's use of the word lunatic there, describing a woman, is going to hurt him? And are there better ways to energize the GOP base and live up to that call for unity in the wake of the RNC? Because things have changed pretty quickly.
Well, look, he has a style that people absolutely adore. Some people don't like, some people adore, that has worked for him thus far. But my concentration is exactly on the policies. And I look at what he was able to get through in his 4 years, even though he was fighting in many times his own party, but able to get through and hoping to be able to take another 4 years to get those same kind of policies through. Policies that will actually help working Americans. And I'm on the Ways and Means Committee. And we recently passed our American Families and Tax Act. We passed it overwhelmingly out of the House, but it's just sitting there in the Senate. And we've got VP Harris, who's already talked about increasing corporate taxes to higher than even communist Venezuela, socialist Venezuela. This is what we're working with right now. So if we don't get those things done beforehand, and this Vice President Harris wins, God knows what our tax policies will look like. But I am concentrated much more on the policies of the Biden-Harris administration that have led to historic highs in inflation, 20% increase in inflation, historic highs in interest rates, historic numbers coming in at the border, historic crime rates. And I'm looking at a President Trump that in his 4 years was able to accomplish so much more. So, if you're going to compare the two, what he calls her, I would rather have him call her out her policies, because I think when you're looking straight at policies, there's absolutely no way Trump is unbeatable. He is absolutely unbeatable.